Breaking developments to bring you now from the talks between Russia and the United States on a potential peace deal with Ukraine. Those talks have finished, but we're now hearing from the State Department of the United States. A spokesperson there said that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Sergei Lavrov, the Russian Foreign Minister, have agreed to appoint high-level teams to begin working on a path to end Russia's war in Ukraine as soon as possible. That is the US State Department spokesperson being cited by the Reuters news agency, saying that they agreed to future cooperation on matters of mutual geopolitical interest, historic economic and investment opportunities that will emerge from an end to the conflict in Ukraine, according to the State Department. One final line, just to bring you, was from the Reuters news agency, also citing Russian officials, saying that Russia and US delegations have treated each other in a respectful manner as equals. Well, let's discuss this further with Samantha de Bendern, Associate Fellow with the Russia and Eurasia programme at Chatham House. We're just getting, Samantha, these comments coming to us live here on Sky News. What are you making from these initial readouts?
Not surprising, particularly not surprising when you see that one of the Russian negotiators is someone called Kirill Dmitriev, who is head of the Russian Investment Fund, former Goldman Sachs banker, former McKinsey consultant, who's there to represent Russia's business interests. And I would really like to call this meeting that took place in Riyadh, not peace talks, not negotiations, but a business meeting. A business meeting between the representatives of two bosses who want to decide how best to share the spoils of war, because that is really what we're seeing here. The fact that, there's now open talk from the Americans of looking at economic cooperation. What does that mean? In the words of Kirill Dmitriev, the Russian negotiator, when he was speaking to the press this morning in Riyadh, it's about American companies, particularly oil and gas companies, returning to Russia. There's been a lot of talk about Ukraine's natural resources, and what is very worrying is whether Trump is thinking to himself, who will give me the best deal on Ukraine's minerals, Trump or Zelenskyy? So the readout is not surprising, but I think it's extremely worrying for the Ukrainians and for all of us here in the wider European continent.
It always strikes me that certainly with regards to Vladimir Putin and Russia, that he has the benefit of time. He can wait until a new administration in the US, for example, comes into place, because there is no check and balance on the power of the Russian president. He is there seemingly for time immemorial, and that he has played his hand, his powerful hand there of time, and waited until the Trump administration has come into office. And now there has been this shift change in standing from what we'd seen under President Biden. Well,
playing for time, in a way, yes. We have to remember that the Russian economy has been suffering a lot under sanctions. One third of its budget is now being spent on defense. This is not good for the Russian economy. If this war had gone on, if Ukraine could count on steadfast support from the West and the United States, then time would have been counted for Putin. But yes, he was waiting for Trump to come back to power. What is particularly concerning as well, when you listen to the rhetoric coming from the American side, they are now parroting the words that Putin has been peddling for the last 3.5 years. The fact that the Americans are now saying that America and Russia are going to talk about wider security issues suggests that Trump has now decided to take Putin up on the discussions that were started in late 2021 on reshaping the Euro-Atlantic architecture. And amongst those requests from Russia were that NATO withdraw to its 1997 borders. So Trump is giving Putin exactly what he wants: a bilateral talk between the United States and Russia on European security.
Trump is offering that, European leaders offering a different perspective. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, making that suggestion in the papers over the weekend of potential of some utilisation of British forces in Ukraine. But Russia has repeatedly said it will only accept a demilitarised, neutral, let's be honest, neutered Ukraine. What would a future British force, European international force, look like if there was one deployed? And one would assume that Russia would insist on retaining some degree of Ukrainian territory anyway?
Well, that's an excellent question, to which I actually don't have an answer. I think that the Prime Minister has quite rightly said that the UK will continue to support Ukraine, that the UK will support any kind of reinforcement of Ukraine's security guarantees. But you're quite right. Russia has been very clear from day one that it will not accept NATO troops on Ukrainian soil. So, would the UK be prepared to send troops to Ukraine against Russia's will and therefore potentially get into confrontation with Russia? Keir Starmer has called for support from the United States if there are any British troops in Ukraine. Would that be logistical support? Would that be air cover? Would that be maritime support, i.e., acknowledging that Russia has more or less lost control of parts of the Black Sea and having some kind of cover there? It's all very much up in the air. So far, there is no peace. President Zelenskyy has been very clear that he will not accept terms that are thrust upon him by the Americans and the Russians without being consulted. Now that Marco Rubio has ended these talks in Riyadh, is he going to immediately debrief President Zelenskyy, which he should? I mean, Zelenskyy should have been at the table, but barring that, Zelenskyy deserves a full readout of what was said, and the Europeans deserve that. Will the Americans treat Zelenskyy and Europeans as certainly concerned parties in these discussions? We will have to see. But it's very early to talk about troops on the ground. To do what? There's no peace. Russia is still bombing Ukraine as we speak. Under whose command? Trump has talked about having non-European troops in Ukraine. What is the UK going to do? Be sort of fighting side or keeping the peace side by side with Chinese or Brazilian troops, which is one idea that has been floated. So that this is all really, really early. We have no idea if this would happen and under what kind of structure. UN, unlikely the Ukrainians would agree. NATO, no, that's not going to happen. An ad hoc European coalition, whose command, how many people, what would be the sort of operational instructions? It's all very much up in the air.
Considering all of those points, considering the limbo that you have detailed, and considering that Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he wouldn't accept a deal that he hadn't been a part of, but what happens if Trump and Putin do thrash out something between the two of them? Can Zelenskyy really reject it? At the end of the day, he's needed American support, Western support for the last 3 years. It would be a very hard political sell internationally to say, well, I'm going to carry on solo, despite the fact that some form of peace has been offered to us.
Kaja Kallas, the former Estonian Prime Minister, who's now European High Commissioner for Foreign Affairs, said, we in Estonia know what Russian peace means. Russian peace means deportations, tortures, the destruction of our nationhood. Zelenskyy knows that peace on Russian terms is not peace. It's anything but peace. It would be, look at what's been happening in the Ukrainian territories that are under Russian occupation: torture, deportations, and death. So I think Zelenskyy has no choice but to continue at least trying to hold the line, stop Russian advance. The question is, will European nations help him do that? And I don't have an answer to that question.
And the wider implications of this as well. China surely watching to see how the world reacts to the situation here, to consider how it pursues aims in Taiwan and elsewhere in the world. Russia, obviously, troops entered Transnistria, the breakaway region of Moldova, in 1992. Russian troops entered Abkhazia and South Ossetia, the breakaway regions of Georgia, in 2008. They entered Ukraine in 2014. Both countries, Russia and China respectively, will draw more conclusions and take actions as a result of how this current situation comes to pass, surely.
Well, that is the risk. And when you mention Russia, and I'm very glad that you mentioned all these previous occasions when Russia did invade its neighbors. Every time Russia invaded its neighbors, the West decided to appease Russia, to say, okay, well, it's actually not that bad. And we continued engaging with them when we tried to include Russia into the Euro-Atlantic community. And every single time that happened, Russia just kept on going further. I know that the definition of insanity is to keep on doing the same thing and hoping you will have a different result. For the last 30 years, Europe, NATO, EU, UK, US have been trying to appease Russia. And each time Russia's thought, okay, well, I can do that. I can get away with it. I can go a little bit further. I would just like to remind people that in 2006, Russia used a radiological weapon on British soil when it killed the spy Alexander Litvinenko. Some British people were contaminated. The response of the Home Office at the time, when Theresa May was Home Secretary, was to say, and this letter is in the public domain, when she said, I do not want a public inquiry on this because it will damage our business interests with Russia. We have been trying to cozy up to Russia, make concessions to Russia, and this is the result that we're in today. It did not make the world a safer place, it made the world a more dangerous place.
Samantha de Bendern, Associate Fellow at Chatham House. Really appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.